Welcome to our panel today about rapid prototyping in health tech. But before we do a deep dive into our discussion, I would like to welcome my guest today, Agnieszka Chyla-Pochrzęst, a delivery lead at NetGuru for health tech, and Agata Rączewska from NetGuru as well, innovation consultant. Before we start the conversation, Aga and Agata, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your focus?
Of course.
You want to start?
Maybe I'll start. Okay. So, like Monica mentioned, I'm a delivery lead in NetGuru, but I focus on health tech, digital health applications. By education, I'm also a biomedical engineer, so it's kind of aligned, my background with what I currently do. But then the past decade, I've been working on software development, consulting companies how to deliver right products to the right people. Having the costs and other constraints in mind, of course. So that's what I currently do now, having worked for some time with pharmaceutical enterprises, but also startups and scale-ups from the health tech area.
Thank you, Aga. And Agata, what about yourself?
So I have background in social psychology, but my whole career I've been in user experience, is designing products for various industries, with this especially soft spot for healthcare. So now in NetGuru, as an innovation consultant, I especially focus on this healthcare vertical where we're at, and I'm advocating for making sure that we have the right approach to working with healthcare products and services, and making sure that from the design perspective, everything is taken care of the way it should be.
Okay, amazing. I'm really happy we're having this talk today. So thank you for joining, and for everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. So the origin of this discussion is, basically some experimentation that you've been doing with the team in the past few weeks. And I know that you've worked on a concept, on a software and concept platform for those suffering from the Alzheimer's disease. And it's called NeuroNest, and it's a digital therapeutic that you have built with the team from the concept through design to implementation in under 6 weeks. So this is basically the origin of the discussion today, and we'll be touching upon such a subject as the why of the prototyping and how. But before we do, let's look at NeuroNest and let's see what you've built.
5 million people have dementia worldwide. Alzheimer's disease may contribute to 60-70% of cases. It's almost 38 million. How about we could make caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease just a little bit easier? Meet NeuroNest, our digital therapeutic platform for Alzheimer's care, uniting patients, caregivers, and medical professionals. With the NeuroNest mobile app, as a caregiver, you have access to advanced technology to enhance the care for your loved ones. The health tracker contains information about your loved one's treatment plan, including medications and diet set up by their doctor. NeuroNest allows you to integrate data from wearables such as Apple Health Kit. Thanks to this, you have a holistic view of their health and can provide valuable insights to healthcare providers. Our 24/7 AI assistant is designed for privacy and data security, while providing complete control. You select information chatbot can use, putting you in charge of what is shared and what's not. Lastly, according to the Alzheimer's Association, memory loss is one of the 10 early signs of Alzheimer's disease. That's why the BrainTrain module offers a variety of engaging games and activities designed to enhance cognitive function and memory retention. The simplified screen is adjusted to the cognitive abilities of the individual suffering from Alzheimer's. You can set it as a default for your loved one. Playing games can be an excellent way to improve brain function and mental health. Our app carefully measures statistics, which are automatically shared with the doctor to help them monitor your loved one's cognitive health. Lastly, the NeuroNest app's AI assistant has been enhanced with the latest ChatGPT technology. This addition to our app enables more personalized and natural conversations, simplifying the process of getting support for daily tasks. The NeuroNest represents a concept of a comprehensive, scalable, digital therapeutic platform. It has the potential to enhance the lives of the individuals affected by Alzheimer's disease and their loved ones. Neuronest, redefining Alzheimer's care.
Okay, so Agata and Aga, we will keep the Neuronest today as our base, but before we talk about the hows, let's focus a little bit on the whys, and let's look at the current market context for digital therapeutics. How does the landscape influence the digital therapeutics? What is it, and where do we stand today? Can we talk a little bit about this before we take a deep dive into the specifics?
Yeah, sure. So let me start with painting a slight picture about the healthcare systems, local state healthcare systems. So they're under a lot of stress, financially speaking, but money is not the only constraint. There is also lack of proper medical specialists in certain countries. And the government IT systems that we're currently implementing, they don't really always work that well. It, of course, depends. But there is a lot going on in this area. Also, since COVID, I think we all remember how it was like 10 years ago. Everything was paper-based. We were all used to filling the very long forms when admitted to a hospital, for example. That has changed by a lot. But then the COVID pandemic has sped up the change for the whole world. So we've been experiencing kind of like a forced transformation in the healthcare area. And we got proven that the original assumptions that, healthcare is sensitive data, sensitive information. We need to have systems very, very secure. That is, of course, true, but it can very well be done using innovative technologies and just digitalization. So this is what's going on. But also, on the other side of the coin, we have pharmaceutical enterprises, life science technologies companies that manufacture medicines, pharmaceuticals, drugs, supplements. So what they do, they of course establish multiple layers of a relationship work with their target populations, patients, but also pharmacists, chemists, laboratory specialists, and doctors and other medical specialists. So what we can now offer is another layer to that relation already built, and maybe opening up some new doors by offering a digital therapeutic application or another kind of health-related system, IT system. So let's imagine that we have a company that manufactures obesity medicine or supplement. And then we can also have a digital therapeutic application that is a complementary offer to that drug. So this is what we are currently observing on the market. Enterprises are purchasing and starting partnerships with digital agencies like ours, for example, to create digital therapeutic applications and other healthcare-related systems to be able to accommodate the niche and set the foot in the door right there, because the market is so active right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aga. And Agata, thinking of your rich experience in the UX area and service design, how does this tie in with this digital therapeutic trends from your perspective?
Yeah, so in healthcare especially, it's very important to recognize that very rarely we will be able to provide a one touch point solution, a standalone app that's going to operate as a singular touch point. So whether we're talking about, being a patient, a healthcare professional, a pharmacist, a person working in a lab with a lot of data, we have to think about systems, the whole ecosystems in which those technological solutions operate. So, for example, with the Neuronest, I can immediately think about three actors: the patient, a person with Alzheimer's, a caregiver, and then a doctor. But these are just the actors visible on the surface. Behind, there are also going to be people who work in a clinic or in a hospital. There's going to be also people who deal with this tremendous amount of data. We also have to think about the data itself. How will the doctor be able to access the information? What kind of things would they want to do about it? Or the other way around, the doctor has to know about this solution in order to recommend it to a caregiver or to a patient, right?
Mhm.
So it's super important to really think about a very wide picture and how this digital therapeutics solutions will fit in these ecosystems, right?
Mhm.
And then in order to do that, a service design approach is a fantastic way to ensure that we do proper discovery, proper research, that we understand all the stakeholders, all the touch points, what's happening in the foreground, in the background, right? And at some point, we're going to get to the moment where it's time to generate an idea, to come up with a solution, right? But we will do it based on the information we gather, based on the research. Still, it will be super important to be able to make sure if that's the right one, whether it's from the UX perspective or the technological perspective. Did we hit the target? We need to validate it before we move on, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So before we go into the specifics, because I would like to talk a little bit today about how did we build this and what advice would you have for somebody who is about to embark on this adventure and the product validation in general. But why are we experimenting with this in the first place? And why is the validation so important? And especially in health tech, does it have any specifics? Does the sector has any specifics that would tell us that it's especially important in here? So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of the validation techniques. They are different, but in general, what would be your point of view on that?
Well, going back to what we said at the very beginning, that in healthcare products, digital products, we deal with sensitive information.
Mm-hmm.
It's information about our life, our close one's life, health, things we don't really want public out there in the public. So they have to be secure. The information that are being transformed and shared between different systems and different people need to be really secured. And there are also a lot of legal constraints in this area, business domain. And due to that fact and the high quality of the systems, because they tend to have an influence on the treatments and the diagnosis process. So simply put, the products have to be done really, really well. They can't malfunction. There can't be any data leaks. And the compliance with the legal regulations also has to be met in every single case. If the product is validated in such a way that it does have to be certified. So the consequence of that is that software development process in this case tends to be more expensive than in other business domains, like let's say transportation. So before we invest hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars or other, currency in a digital product, we have to be sure that the idea that we're having behind it and the target populations and the way we want to reach them with a certain solution are proper, are correct. So like Agata has mentioned, it's really a service that we're discussing. It's not a product itself. The digital product is never just one single touch point with the person, and there is never just one stakeholder in case of healthcare. So the whole process of design and validation has to be really well thought through and planned out to make sure that the results that we're going to have are the right ones. It's like with scientific studies. If you take wrong hypothesis for analysis, you'd end up with wrong results, even if the process looks good and it really seems legit, let's say. So I'd say we validate ideas not to overinvest without any business guarantee that there is going to be a market success behind it. And it actually has to do with the constraints that we're currently facing in this area as well. And one of them is how to monetize digital therapeutics, to have this very specific example of the applications used for digital therapies and supplement therapies, not one-to-one with a specialist, but let's say through a digital platform. So in this case, The US market is a very good example because I guess there is this clear division between the public system and the private system. And within the private sector, things happen. Within the public sector, things happen, but slower. So we have this all over the world. And currently, state healthcare systems are only catching up with technology in this area. So we're observing, like, for example, in United States, exactly with FDA, but also in Germany and in France and in other European countries, we're observing new laws being written and executed regarding digital therapeutics and, generally speaking, medical applications that try to bring them, just like medicines and dietary supplements, closer to the reimbursement systems. But we're quite away from the, I think, final outcome we all want to achieve, that a digital therapeutic application can be normally covered by the government part of your therapy plan.
Okay, so Aga, you mentioned a lot about the specifics of the compliance and security and data, a strong delivery perspective. And then Agata, when we would look at the same topic of the why is experimenting with the validations technique so important, deriving on your experience based on UX and product design and service design, what can this help us with? What traps can it help us avoid? Having in mind your experience.
Well, first of all, like Aga mentioned, we will be, by experimenting and validating our ideas with the right audience, with the right users, with the right stakeholders, we're able to save money because we're not going to be developing the wrong solution that's not a good fit or doesn't work with the ecosystem, right? But when we build products in healthcare, we very often need to sell the idea to our stakeholders, whether they're patients or whether it's someone in a big company that needs to get on board with that. By creating a prototype, we're able to illustrate what we mean and what it will actually be able to do or how it will fit within a broader system. So that's another benefit. But also from the compliance perspective, when we talk about healthcare-related digital products, some of them will be or will need to be certified as software as medical device. And in order for that certification to go through, a certain number of things need to happen. And one of those things is validating the idea with users, or having properly documented and executed user tests that basically ensure that what we do is what the software does is what is good for the user, for the patient in that sense.
Thank you. And, I'm thinking, because you mentioned a lot of cases where it's important to validate. So, but my general question would be, when would you recommend for somebody to validate? And do we always validate? Is it always a good idea? Or there are certain instances when we would be okay to omit this and just go straight into development and building products? What's your point of view on that?
Always. I mean,
always.
It's never a bad idea to validate. And of course, we're going to have different kinds of constraints or different kinds of situations. So it might happen that we're developing something very specific for a very niche amount, like niche group of users, maybe something that will not be software as medical device. And we might feel that we have all the expertise needed in order to do that. But running even a small validation with a couple of users, is going to be better than not doing it at all. And then because as designers or designers or people who develop the product, we're always biased. As people who have the idea for the product, we're always biased. We're in an information bubble, whether we like it or not. And even if we have a proper kind of research, going with our idea to the market, to the users, to the stakeholders, and getting their input will be extremely beneficial. And this is only from the user experience perspective. But then there's always the technological perspective. And developing healthcare solutions, we will be very often have challenges where different kind of technologies will have to talk to one another in order for the whole service to work. And we need to experiment with finding the right one that will, be feasible, that will be cost effective, and that will simply work. And then creating a prototype and experimenting and then validating whether this particular technological solution works with our users and also meets the user needs. It's not too difficult to use. Is extremely important. So I see always.
Anna, what's your view?
I would add to that that yes, please do always validate, but not necessarily through a prototype, right? Because there are, like Agata has mentioned at the very beginning, there are many different ways to validate an idea. Sometimes it's just research and just loose conversations, which of course is a way to perform user validation, of course, but in a less formal way. This is a very interesting aspect what you've mentioned about creating proof of concepts and validating technologies, especially in healthcare. There are some specific technologies having to do with data interoperability, for example, like FHIR, but also the specific cloud providers that we can use in this area that provide a certain level of security that is enforced. We need to validate whether these building blocks are going to work well together, and the end-to-end solution is still going to be secure, even though we are using secure, parts of it. So this is definitely one of the most important areas. We have also done that in case of NeuroNest. We had to make sure that the platform ideated in a way that it shares patients' results from the daily activities and the gaming model with the doctor, that this data is going to be transferred first in a correct manner, so the doctor can clearly see some tendencies in there and draw proper conclusions based on that, because this was a part of a therapy. So we assumed medicine is going to be prescribed based on our data. This is really important. We're talking about someone's life here. So the proper construction of data is one thing, and visibility of it and how we serve it to the specialist. But then the other thing is making sure that the data is secure. So we're dealing with authorization, of course, but then the building blocks themselves that have to be validated. So a proof of concept was also performed here and is a part of validation of your solution for the future, even if not connected to the users per se.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And I think you're touching upon a very important subject. So let's stop here for a second, because both of you mentioned that we can validate different things. We can validate a business idea, we can validate a user flow, we can validate UX, or we can validate a feasibility of the technological solution. So from what you're saying, and I would like to underscore it because I think it's very important. We can validate different things and do it in different ways. Aga, you mentioned that the validation can just be a documentation stating that it's feasible to deliver a solution, or it can be validating a business idea just to make sure that it solves the right problem, right? So let's stop a little bit here, because I think we have this common misconception that whether we talk about the proof of concept and a prototype, those are two different techniques and then they are aimed at two different things, but that the result of this will be a foundation, a basis for a future product. So is this always right? Is it always correct? Does it always mean that once we validate it, when we are on the right track, we can all reuse it and now build a new product of it?
Okay, so maybe let's start with focusing on a prototype for a minute. The prototype's purpose is to validate the product, the functionality of the product, its UI, how it works, whether how it was designed corresponds with the target population's needs, with the proper users. So chosen users from the group that is really going to use the application in the future. And in case of a prototype, I have seen many prototypes just thrown away to the bin because the idea was validated negatively. And this is something that we should accept, although there are just as many or even more cases of parts being reused in the future, or even the whole thing being just further developed. But there is one very, very important thing to remember here. When we created prototype, we created in minimizing the initial investment in mind. So of course, we're not creating a applications prototype with full test coverage, which is expected from healthcare applications, with full documentation, functional, like user manual and technical. We only have, in some cases, like the architecture scheme, and that's it. We just go from there because we want to have a very small product done in a short period of time, because we're also talking about competition, right? Since the market is so active, there are a lot of companies trying to create the ultimate Alzheimer's digital therapeutic application, right? It's not like one company, there are tens, hundreds, thousands maybe of them all over the world. So the matter of timing is really important as well, not the finances themselves. So the quicker you validate in a way that gives you valuable feedback and high quality feedback. And that's why in some cases it's worth to develop an application, a clickable application, not just, for example, a design prototype that in which you just click through a very closed off path, user path. So it is important to shorten this period of time. The quicker you do it, the faster you can introduce a really well thought through product to the market, and your product has higher chances of succeeding there.
And you touched upon a super important subject, that the prototype can be a lot of very different things. And not only it can be a lot of different things, but then we use it in different moments. So when validating an idea for a service or for a product, we might even just create a story, a video prototype that we will show to different stakeholders in order to validate, hey, does it make sense to think of this problem or this solution in that way? Or it might be a clickable, Figma prototype, but we might not even have to prototype the whole system or the whole product. Sometimes we might want to just to prototype, a single functionality in order to test it, to see if that's going to work. And then again, the level of fidelity of this prototype can be very different. Sometimes it's going to be a very high fidelity, beautiful UI prototype because we think it's very important that we actually get feedback on how it looks at a certain stage. Or sometimes it might be literally a pen and pencil, drawing, or even a no, right? That we're going to show to maybe a developer and say, hey, so this is how I think about this. This is my prototype of the solution. Is this technically feasible in order to do that in that way? So prototypes can be used internally as well to communicate within the team, as well as externally to validate an idea, right?
So I think, I would like to sum this up because I believe what you mentioned is really important. So basically the questions we should be asking ourselves first is, what do we want to validate? What technique will help us the most? And what is the scope of the validation, right? So I believe like we have three important questions and a heads up that it doesn't always mean that it will be a foundation of your future product, because based on the validation, it most probably will evolve, and it probably should evolve. So having this in mind, let's move a little bit towards the hows. And you've literally just worked on Neuronest. So I would like to talk a little bit about let's say, a success criteria for how to effectively validate, and we can derive a little bit from your experience when working on Neuronest. What are the important factors to consider? How to validate, how to build things fast, let's say under 6 weeks. What are the elements? What would you mention? What do you think?
Yeah, so an example from another domain came to me right now. When you write an article, the first version immediately after you finish feels like this is the one, that it's finished. This is going to be a great article for everyone to read. And then if you have some experience, you leave it for a few days, or you show it to a corrector, And what you end up with is usually much, much better. And even yourself, when you read your work after a few days with a slightly different mindset, with this time having passed, you can give yourself feedback. So the first thing would be the research. The quality of the research that you perform at the very beginning sets the tone for the whole product design and ideation. And I really just recommend spending time on learning, talking to people, to your target populations, even like Agata said, with a paper drawing in your hand, or just a short description of an idea. Talk to some investors from the domain, talk to some representatives of the institutions and groups that are going to use it and are supposed to benefit from it, because what you believe in is not necessarily what is true. So that is the first thing. And the second, from my personal perspective, would be the talents in the team that you're going to gather. The team to create a prototype is an entirely and generally validate an idea properly before it goes to the market and before you invest so much. It is a different team than in case of, like, let's call it standard, but of course there's no one way to do things, but standard software development, a longer one, more waterfall one, with the 1 year, 2 years, sometimes 5 years plan lined up and executed step by step. So agility is key here, and being able to understand the product through and through by every single member of the team. We can't really afford having researchers do the research and they're done, and then the designers just take the results of the research and draw something, and then we have the UI of the application, and the developer just takes it and implements. Because it's just not going to be good enough and fast enough, because the speed is also key. Like we have discussed, it has to do with the competition, but also with the money, right? We don't want to engage this interdisciplinary team for weeks and weeks to come. We want to close this work in a short period of time, like 4 weeks in some cases, 2 weeks, 1 week. It could be enough. In other cases of more complex systems, it's going to be 2 months, 3 months, and that's fine also, because of course it depends on what we're validating, with whom we're validating, what kind of results we want to get. But I'd say that whom you need are people who have open minds, who have versatile expertise, and are able to research and develop and deliver things fast.
Right.
And then it's important to create a team out of them, so they cooperate and they share this knowledge and experience.
And
Yeah.
just let me add one thing about the expertise of people in the team. It has to be complementary. So it's not enough to have 5 super good developers and then we're going to make it in 6 weeks, right? It's really good to have some people with in case of NeuroNest, some people with background in health sciences, or someone with expertise in Alzheimer. It's going to be important to have a designer, a researcher, a developer, someone who will be able to bring it all together. So this complementary talents is key in order to be fast and agile.
So basically what you're saying is that the mindset is the first step. And I like to say that for such teams to be successful, they literally need to breathe lean. They need to breathe lean to be able to deliver, because it's not so simple. So apart from the mindset, and we can look at NeuroNest, are there any specific tech stacks or competencies that you would say, hey, these would be crucial when doing a prototype of X? Or you would say, hey, it depends on the scope of what you're validating, it depends of the reasons, etc. Is there anything that you would say, hey, this is said that this always works?
I guess Agata should say that the research always works. So researchers always work. But if we're validating technology, experts in architecture and not like very narrowly focused people who do, for example, just development in one technology, I would rather move away from that. Full stacks in case of developers, architects, people with more experience rather than less. And the unfortunate thing is we need experienced people here.
Right.
We can't really have people learning and having this project as their first one, because it's just going to take too long. I mean, of course we can, but this takes away the time of the team, not adds the time to the team. So that would be for technology. For design, we need someone that has time and preferably experience to review the benchmark and do the benchmark of the solution. So basically review what is out there, what is already going on, what other projects are being planned in the same area by other companies, because in some cases this is public information, especially if we're talking state applications which have open RFPs, for example, right?
But I would say that to answer your question, Monica, is there a perfect setup? It depends. Like, we cannot say that there is one recipe that, hey, we always need this and that. Even with research, as much as I believe we should always do it, it also, depends on the stage where we are, what kind of research we do, who do we involve. So it's very important to be agile. And I think from the technological perspective, Aga, what you mentioned, having a full stack technology person is super important. But at some point, we might discover, hey, we might need to research that very particular technology a little bit more because we might find this one useful. So having, I want to say access to that person, that's not very nice, but having someone like that able to join the team and help out is super important. It's going to allow for things to move on smoothly, right?
Right.
Just design, right? We might discover that, for example, so there's a topic of accessibility, which is, of course, a very important
topic. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that?
Yeah. So it's something that in every software we have to think about, and in healthcare software, it's something that is extremely important and cannot be omitted. But of course, when we create a prototype, we have to think, what is the purpose of our prototype? Are we right now focusing on implementing, if it's a proof of concept, or if it's a technological prototype? Is it important right now to implement all the accessibility features, or are we doing it in order to test whether the technology works, right? Because I think we're gonna talk in a bit about that. The prototype is not an MVP. It's not. It's not the base of a product. It's an experiment. It's a validation effort that's going to bring us closer to developing a product. So, it might be that we're designing for a population, for example, with NeuroNest. This is the case where accessibility features will be extremely important because of their age, because of their cognitive abilities, and so on and on. So, in case of NeuroNest, we had a designer on board who knew about how to design with accessibility in mind. And that visual aspect of accessibility was there, right? So it was important at that stage. But I can imagine that if we were doing NeuroNest in order to pitch an idea to a VC, it might be important to focus maybe on something else, or they might not be looking at that particular thing specifically. So it's a matter of making an educated decision where to put focus when we're developing a prototype.
So basically, it's not easy because it's not only about making sure that you know what you're validating and what technique do you need, but it's also difficult because you need to have the right team on board with the right mindset, being able to ask the right questions and set the right pace, making sure that it's actually effective and it doesn't take too long. Aga, anything you would add to that?
Agata, when Agata was describing this approach to accessibility, something else came to mind, because in some cases we are creating prototypes not only for the main target group that is going to use the application, but also stakeholders that are decision makers, like you have just mentioned about the budget. So in some cases, we create the prototype to unblock the corporate budget for some specific purpose. Or in case of startups, we're gathering the first funding round and we need to have something palpable to show to people. So in this case, I'd say that the team composition and the skills within our team need to correspond with the needs of these people as well, not just the users, the future users, but also the current clients that we're facing.
Right. Thank you for that, Aga. I wanted to go back to one topic because Agata, you mentioned accessibility, and I'm thinking, right, we are talking health tech. It's a sector with some inherent limitations in certain places. So does this mean that prototyping or building proof of concepts, validating ideas for this specific area is more difficult or more expensive and more challenging for a variety of reasons, or not necessarily? What are some of the limitations that one should be aware of when talking specifically about health tech?
To be honest, I just say no. It's not more expensive in healthcare. For the validation part. So let's take one step back from that answer and paint a bigger picture again. So we're talking at the beginning about how the software development and digital products development, then launch and then marketing tends to be more expensive in case of this sector than others. And it is true. And the compliance with legal requirements and accessibility, for example, but also data protection, these are the things that influence the cost. The level of security, the level of quality and documentation you must deliver. But then when we validate the idea, we focus on that. We don't want to overinvest. So this first step of the very long way that you're undertaking as an enterprise, as a company, when you decide to develop such a product, is comparable with other areas. But then if you want to reuse the parts, you need to invest in additional time to make them compliant, to make them meet the standards they have to meet. So the validation is not more expensive. It just, functionality specific, target group specific, but the whole projects, of course, have to meet certain standards.
So again, it seems like we keep going back to the topic of make sure that you know what you're validating, what for, what is the group, what scope, what area, and make sure that you have the right people who breathe lean. And Agata, you mentioned the MVP topic, and we talk about prototyping, proof of concepts, but I see that sometimes it get mixed up with what is the deliverable of this, and is this an MVP already? Is it not an MVP? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's your point of view?
So a short answer is it all depends, as to I think every question we ask today. But as a designer, I cannot say otherwise. It all depends. But a prototype does not necessarily have to be an MVP, and I think more often than not, it's not. One, because it can be even non-technical, so it's not an MVP, right? But it also very often just goes to the bin, because the prototype of itself is not a product. It's an effort that we make in order to validate an idea, and we might just simply not validate it. And therefore, we've learned, we have the knowledge, we don't have the product. We're one step closer to the product, right? But the prototype itself was not the product, was not the MVP. So I like to think of prototypes as experiments that bring us closer to where we want to be. And at some point, we're going to be like, okay, we've got it. Now it's time to move on to MVP. And like we mentioned before, there will be bits and pieces, of course, that we will be able to reuse, because maybe we've developed some UI that turned out that it works and it's nice and it fits our need, or a UX solution that we will want to reuse in our MVP, or we've discovered which technical stack works or not. And I'm super curious about your perspective as well.
I guess we can say that every learning opportunity is valuable, like you've mentioned, and even if the idea is validated negatively, maybe we have just validated how our partnership with the provider works, because we're assuming there are going to be at least a few players here when we create a digital product for healthcare. So there are internal competences that you have and external ones. You have to map them all out and create partnerships that are going to bring you much, much closer to the goal. So even if the product or idea for the product is validated negatively, like you have just mentioned, maybe that partnership was really good, and it's a good step to start further work.
Thank you so much, ladies. And just moving to the very final remark, just to make sure that we reiterate on the most important points, if you were to give an advice to somebody who is embarking on this journey of, proofing of concept, prototyping, validating the idea, what would be the one of the most important element you would mention, just to reiterate on the most important points? Agata, what do you think? Final remarks.
Yes, please do validate.
Please do. Okay.
Go for it as early in your service or product development as possible. Don't overthink it. Just experiment and be ready to fail and learn and experiment again. And this will most definitely make your product better in the end. It will for sure save you money and time in the final product, in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, please do.
Thank you. Aga, anything from a strong delivery point of view?
I'm not sure it's going to be strong delivery. It's going to be strong compliance, because when we have an idea for a product within this very specific area, which is digital therapeutics and digital health, Agata was mentioning before that they need to be, in some cases, certified as software as medical device. And that entails a whole alternative, reality of activities to perform. And if you have already validated with an expert, compliance expert, that this specific digital product has to be certified, then you will behave throughout the validation process slightly differently, because then just documenting it will allow you to use it as a really important piece of further activities. So if you do that first, or at least parallelly, you'll have a more clear path lined out for your next steps to take.
Thank you, Aga. So Aga, thank you for sharing your experience today, and for everybody listening, thank you for joining in today. Thanks.
Thank you so much.